Okay, so you should have had something come up notifying you that this meeting's being recorded. And so what I was talking about is, so this is a review session similar to what we've had for the first 3 exams. I realize that because this is in the middle of the day that several people may not be able to join. So I think it's particularly important that we do record this meeting so that people have a chance to be able to review it prior to the exam opening tomorrow. I do realize that the timing is different on this exam. There is actually a reason for that. And so it's opening on Wednesday because of the final exam schedule at Texas Women's. The Friday of final exams week is normally reserved for makeup exams. So for instance, if somebody has 3 exams scheduled on the same day, they can delay one of those exams and take it on Friday. And so that's the reason that it's starting a little bit earlier. So we're starting tomorrow. I think it opens at 1 p.m. tomorrow. And I had it open for, that 36 hours or so, closing the next day at 11:59 p.m. I am not necessarily limited by the timing, and so I'd be happy to leave that open similar to what we've had before. And so I think what I'll do is I'll post a poll in Canvas to ask the class whether they would like it to be open through Friday. I know that that might be important for some people's work schedules and things like that. Okay, so like I said, the intent of this session is to go through information that's going to be on the final exam and to go through the format of the final exam. And so I will go through the study guide and I will go through some example questions. I didn't have a chance to look up more questions, so they're actually the same ones that are in the PowerPoint. If you all want, I can post some additional questions so that you have some additional examples. But that won't be done until probably late this evening, just knowing my schedule and the other classes that I have to prepare exams for. So before I get to that, I want to open it up and see if you guys have any questions that you want to talk about, any specific questions, or if you want me to jump through, go ahead and jump into talking about the format of the exam and kind of walking through the study guide. Okay, so I have one request to go ahead and start with the study guide. Okay, so let me share my screen and I will walk through the study guide. The study guide is posted in Canvas. It's actually been posted for at least a few days. I actually think I think I fixed it to be accurate with the information that will be on the final exam. I think I did that last week. And so here, let me share this. And what you should be seeing now is the study guide, and you should be able to see my mouse with an arrow there, the cursor. And so this is the study guide that is posted in Canvas, and it's similar to the study guides for the first 3 exams. The final exam is comprehensive, and so the material is split between a comprehensive portion and then a new material portion. I don't know that it's actually, when you take the exam, it's labeled, but you'll be able to see what information. The end of the exam is new material. The beginning of the exam is comprehensive. So by comprehensive, I mean that's material that was covered on the first 3 exams. So for that material, my main suggestion for studying for that is to go back and look at those first 3 exams. So you can look at the study guides for the previous test, but you can actually go back and look at the test. So you can go back and see the exams. You can go back and run through the questions. And so you can basically go through and test yourself again on that material by looking at your old exam. It does require you to go through the Respondus Lockdown browser to be able to see it, but you can definitely see your old exams. And so what my suggestion would be is to go through those old exams and use them to identify material that you have a really good grasp of, you understand completely, and then not spend time studying that material, but spend time studying information that was covered on those first 3 exams that you may not have quite as good of a grasp of. You've maybe missed some questions on that material, or you may have forgotten some of the information, right? And go back and do a refresher on the material that you identify that you might need to brush up on a little bit. And so when you do that, that'll help make your study time a bit more efficient. And so that's my suggestion, is to go through your old exams. The questions are not going to be identical, but they are still taken from test banks from the textbook. And so there may be some identical questions, but they're going to be similar questions. In constructing the final exam, I tried to concentrate on main idea information, particularly for the comprehensive material, the stuff that comes from the first 3 tests. So I tried not to get into a lot of details for the questions, and really focus on kind of the main ideas for each of those concepts that we talked about for the first 3 exams. Okay, so that's what I would do for the comprehensive section. For the new material section, you basically have 2 systems that we're covering. And so it's really the renal and urologic system, and the digestive system. And the digestive system, there's just a little bit there. And so I'm going to walk through kind of the information here, because we did cover 3 chapters in the videos that were posted, and I realize they're not me, they were posted from YouTube. But the 3 chapters that fed into that information were chapter 3. And basically in chapter 3, we're looking at fluids and electrolytes, including acid base biology. This is normal functioning. And so really what I focused on, or what you should focus on, is the role of the kidneys in electrolyte balance and fluid balance, and in acid base balance. And so the kidneys, as part of the urologic system, are the ones that help with this balance of fluids, electrolytes, acids, and bases. And so just know how the kidney functions normally to help maintain a balance of electrolytes in both intracellular and extracellular fluids. So know basically how it works, know how it helps to keep your hydration balance. So it helps with water balance in the production of urine, to get rid of excess electrolytes, to get rid of excess water. And then how hormone systems affect kidney function, right? And so some of the hormones that we talked about were aldosterone, antidiuretic hormone, and the natriuretic peptides from the heart, and how each one of these is used to regulate ion and water balance. So ions are charged particles. Those are the electrolytes that I'm talking about. And then also how the kidneys function in maintaining acids and bases, and maintaining that acid-base balance. So understand how the kidneys buffer acids and bases to maintain the acid-base balance. And then we got into really how the kidneys work. So chapter 38 is also normal physiology. And so that is used to understand alterations. So most of the questions are going to be about alterations, because this is pathophysiology. It's going to be about alterations to renal and urologic function. But we will walk through some of the information about how the kidneys actually work. And so we talked about the unique anatomy of the kidney, So he talked about the unique anatomy of the kidney and the bladder and ureters, things like that, the excretory part of the urologic system. And so you want to know a bit about the structure of the kidneys, because that dictates how the kidneys function. You want to know a little bit about the urinary system, like the bladders, the ureters, the urethra, how they work. The kidneys, their main function is to help filter the blood, and the kidneys create the urine, and then the urinary system, the bladders, the ureters, that bring the urine to the bladder, and the bladder holds the urine until you're ready to void. And then the urethra is the tube through which you void urine, right? And so know about the basic anatomy, know how know about the blood flow into the kidneys and how the kidneys actually function. So know how the blood flows through the kidneys, because the kidneys, that's their main function, is to filter substances from the blood, mostly electrolytes and fluids, right? And so that blood flowing through the kidneys, you want to know a little bit about that, and how it's regulated by the kidneys, the nervous system, hormones, and other factors, right? And so the basics of this, not real fine details, but the basics. So I told you that in the comprehensive section of the final exam, I'm going to focus mostly on main ideas and not get into a lot of details, because this is new information that you're being tested on for the first time. There will be more details on the section of the exam that covers material that we talked about in class since exam 3, since the third exam, just the third test. Okay, so going back to this, so you do want to know a little bit about how blood flows through the kidneys, how it's regulated. You want to know the structure of the kidneys, the structure of the nephrons, how they work. So where you're going to get substances coming out of the blood and into the urine, where that filtration actually occurs in the nephron, and how it's regulated. And so particularly how hormones regulated. So the regulatory aspects of how the different substances are filtered by the kidneys and end up in the urine. And then this chapter also talks a bit about tests of kidney functions. So what tests you can use to test whether the kidneys are working appropriately. And a lot of this is through urinalysis. And so there's other things that you can test. So you can test renal clearance, blood flow, but a lot of things come from urinalysis. And that can tell us a lot about urological function and overall health. So you want to know some of the basic tests, and particularly how you might be able to interpret some of those tests. So for instance, if there's a lot of sodium in the urine, what is the interpretation of that? If there's a lot of protein in the urine, what is the interpretation of that? Okay, and then we really are focusing on alterations to renal and urologic function. And so in doing that, we talked about things like urinary tract obstructions. So things that would can obstruct the flow of urine, for instance, kidney stones, or neurogenic bladder. So things that could affect the flow of urine, that are actually urinary tract obstructions. We also talked a little bit about urinary tract infections. So how do UTIs affect the urologic system, and what are they indicative of? And then finally, kidney disorders themselves. So problems with the glomerulus in the kidneys. And so you want to understand the difference between acute and chronic glomerulonephritis dysfunction. And you also want to be able to differentiate between symptoms that are associated with nephrotic and nephritic syndromes. And so know a little bit about what nephrotic and nephritic syndromes are. And so we're going to go through example questions through this new material. Also be able to compare and contrast acute and chronic kidney disease, and and the association with acute events or systemic disease. So all of this was covered in the videos. And then lastly, we're going to focus on chapter 42. And in fact, that's really the only chapter that we're going to focus on for digestive function. And so there are a couple of things here to pay attention to. One is disorders of the gastrointestinal tract, the GI tract, and then disorders of accessory organs of digestion. And so the GI tract itself, how does GI dysfunction manifest? And so it can manifest with things like anorexia. So you know that starvation, the wasting that can occur. Vomiting is a dysfunction of the GI tract. And be able to provide examples of the types and describe the pathology of things like gastritis, inflammatory bowel disease, peptic ulcer, etc. And then the very last thing about these accessory organs of digestion, and so how dysfunction in the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas, how that can affect primary GI function. And so that's going to be movement of food through the GI tract, the production of feces, and the excretion of feces, so the defecation. And so in doing this, you're going to want to know a little bit about what the GI tract looks like, from the esophagus to the stomach, to the small intestine, to the large intestine, to the rectum, and getting rid of the waste products from the digestive system. How things are absorbed mostly in the small intestine, and then you're removing water in the large intestine to concentrate the feces, and then what dysfunction of that's going to look like, right? And so like diarrhea is a primary dysfunction that you might see in the GI tract. All right, so what the test looks like is this. And so this exam is worth more. It's worth 150 points. And that is divided half and half. So 75% is on the material that was covered in the first 3 exams. Those questions are going to be 1, 2, and 3 point. Actually, the entire exam is still the same thing: 1, 2, and 3 point questions. But it's divided half and half, 75% on material covered on the first 3 exams, and 75 points, 75 points on the material in the first 3 exams, and then 75 points on the material that has been introduced since the 3rd exam. It's broken down like this. So in the comprehensive portion, you have 50 questions. So you actually have 50 questions in both. They're broken down the same way. 31 point questions that test your knowledge of basic concepts. 15 2-point questions that test your ability to recognize patterns, and then 5 3-point questions which ask you to deduce or infer and apply your knowledge to new situations. And that's true for both the comprehensive portion and the material that's covered since the 3rd exam. So each one is going to have 50 questions, so there are a total of 100 questions on this exam. There are 2 hours for this exam. Unless you have an accommodation that gives you more time. And so the exam will self-submit after 2 hours. That should be plenty of time to answer 100 questions. You've been doing 90 minutes for 70 questions, 72 questions. So you've been doing, you just have plenty of time on the final exam with 2 hours to take it. Okay. Use the study methods that have been effective for you. And so as a class, you guys are doing great. The average on the exams has been right there at a B level. And so you guys know how to study as a class. So use the things that work best for you. If group study works for you, by all means, try to do that. I did try to set up groups. I'm not sure if you guys are utilizing them, but those groups are still there if you want to try to utilize them for the final exam. For knowledge-based questions, things like flashcards work well. Self-testing always works well, so I do suggest that you use the first 3 exams to test yourself. Recopying your notes works really well because what that does is it uses both declarative and procedural memory. So it those two types of memory reinforce each other, and it helps to reinforce the information. Things that help with basic understanding of the various disorders and things like that. Things like concept maps, building tables, or even making up mnemonics to help with memorization, right? Those types of things can help with particularly the concept maps and building tables and things like that. Teaching someone else, that really helps with those application type questions. Because if you can teach this material to somebody else and you can create those concept maps and tables, you really do understand the material. For this exam, if you want to use a page of scratch paper, I'm perfectly fine with that. Just show me that both sides are blank at the beginning when you do the environmental check. Just show both sides of the paper during that environmental check. And so I think that covers pretty much everything for that. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if there's any questions at this point. If there aren't any questions now, what I'll do is I will go through some example questions, walk through those with you guys, and talk about the reasons why the best answer is the best answer. Again, all the questions are coming from the test banks. Well, actually, the majority of the questions are coming from the test banks. So, and draw on the knowledge that you have to help with answer your questions. So other tips, try to stick with your first answer unless you know for sure that that answer is incorrect. Usually your first impression is going to be correct. So try to stick with your first answer unless you know absolutely for sure that that was incorrect. Many people will change their answers because the wording of the questions coming up makes them second guess themselves. So you want to make sure that you know for sure that that answer is incorrect if you're going to change it. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second to see if there's any specific questions. And if not, I will go and share the PowerPoint slide and walk through PowerPoint review questions and walk through those with you guys. Okay, it doesn't look like anybody is jumping in with any specific questions or anything so far. As I'm pulling this up, let me also assure you that I am working on grading. I know that the extra points for the exams that I've curved are not in Canvas yet. I will get those in. I do have to do them. Well, I don't have to, but in my experience, trying to upload scores from an Excel sheet usually causes more problems than it's worth. And so it's easier for me to go through and just do it one by one. And so I am working on that earnestly this week. And so I'm trying to get that caught up. The TA for the course, Manus, has gone through and she has updated a lot of the extra credit. You can get up to 20 points extra credit, and that can help with you getting, actually, in many cases, it can raise your grade a letter. And so, 20 points of extra credit is something that is substantial. I am kind of playing with the idea of offering another 5 to 10 points extra credit if you choose. So you can get that 20 points extra credit pretty easily by just doing the quizzes that were embedded within the videos. And so most of you got 20 points automatically just by doing those questions embedded in the videos. I am toying with the idea of allowing another 5 to 10 points for that paper posting option. And so I think I am going to put a poll up about keeping the exam open longer. And on that poll, I'll also put a point. I know what the answer is going to be. Of course, you guys are going to want more extra credit, but I'll word it in such a way that if that was offered, would you take advantage of it? And so I will post a poll question in Canvas on that. Okay, so I think you should be, let me make sure the share seems to be working. Okay. All right, I guess it's not shared yet. Okay, so it should be sharing now the slideshow version of, and I'm going to try to get a pointer here, slideshow version of the review questions that are sample questions for new material that could be on this exam. You can always go back to the sample questions for the other 3 exams, and you have a couple sets of those sample questions. I will do my best to try to get posted sometime tonight additional review questions so that you have a few more review questions for the couple chapters that will be emphasized on the new portion, but I can't guarantee that that's going to happen because it's finals week and I've got 3 classes to deal with. So I will do my best to get a few more of these questions up. I can't guarantee that there won't be some duplicates. Okay, for each of these questions in these examples, what follows is what I think might be the additional, the number of points that would be associated with that type of question. Okay, so the tests are going to have to have a curve. So I'm answering questions that are actually in the chat. And so exams 1 and 3 have a curve. I think exam 1 was 5 points and exam 3 was 2 points, if I remember correctly. I will put an announcement up about what the curves are even before I get those points added in Canvas. I will also curve the final exam if it's appropriate. And so I'm looking for a particular distribution because of this being an upper division course. Often the final exam is curved. And so I will put an announcement up today about the points that are curved on those exams. The first and the third exam. The second exam you guys did very well on, and so I couldn't justify a curve for the second exam. But there is one, I think it's 5 points on exam 1 and 2 points on exam 3. But I'll put an announcement up so that you can calculate your own grade. Kenna asked if there is going to be an opportunity for extra credit. And yes, that's the poll that I'm going to put up, which I'm sure everybody will like. It will be in addition to the video questions. So many of you already got 20 points just by answering the video questions. And so this would be for that paper option in the discussion board. And yes, if you have not done it yet, you can do that. I'd have to turn in grades by 5 p.m. on Monday, the 12th. So Monday, May 12th. And so I will put this in an announcement as well. As long as it's done by then, it will count. Okay. And so I think that will help some of you with some of the concerns you have about requirements for the nursing program. Okay, so I think I've answered the questions in the chat. I'm going to come back here and talk about information that's in the example questions. Okay, so this first question is a 2-point question. It says a student asked about natriuretic peptides and asked which of the statements by the professor is most accurate. And so these are the options. Option A, increased blood pressure and so this is about natriuretic peptides. So the professor says that they increase blood pressure and decrease sodium and water excretion. That's option A. Option B, they increase heart rate and decrease potassium excretion. Option C, they decrease heart rate and increase potassium excretion. And D, they decrease blood pressure and increase sodium and water excretion. And so what you want to look at here are keywords that are in this. So we're talking about natriuretic peptides. The natri prefix here, that is referring to sodium. And so what you want to do is you can probably rule out the things about potassium because this should be affecting sodium, right? And so now you have to know what natriuretic peptides do. And so natriuretic peptides produced by the heart, and such as the heart or the brain, and they do things like, what you just have to know what natriuretic peptides kind of do. And so the best answer here, and I'll move to the next one, the best answer is going to be D. If I can get it to, there we go. And so if you run the slideshow, the correct answer should show up in red. They're all animated. And so if you download the PowerPoint and run the slideshow, you can quiz yourself. The correct answer should show up in red. And so the best answer here, the one that is most truthful from the professor, is that natriuretic peptides do decrease blood pressure, and they increase sodium and water excretion. And so the key here is, because it's a natriuretic peptide, it's going to be moving sodium, and it moves sodium into the urine. And so it's causing sodium to come out in the urine. And so it's increasing sodium and sodium and water excretion. Okay, next question. This will be a 1-point question. What part of the kidney controls renal blood flow, glomerular filtration, and renin secretion? So renin being a hormone from the kidney. Is it the macula densa? Is it the visceral epithelium? Is it the juxtaglomerular apparatus, or JGA? Or is it the filtration slits? And so the best answer here is the juxtaglomerular apparatus. So let me get back on this. I'll just show up in red. So what does this mean? And so some of these things you can rule out. Well, you can rule out B. It's not the visceral epithelium, because that's not even part of the kidney, right? And it's not the, and so just knowing how the kidney works, you should be able to answer this question, right? So it's what part of the kidney controls the renal blood flow, glomerular filtration, and renin secretion. Is going to be that hard for me to say, juxtaglomerular apparatus, JGA. And so it does work with the macula densa cells. And so the cells in the juxtaglomerular cells and the macula densa cells form this apparatus. And so the macula densa prevents large fluctuations in body water and salt. The visceral epithelium is the parietal epithelium, and so it's not directly involved in filtration. The filtration slits are intracellular clefts that modulate filtration. So the best answer for controlling all three of these things is the juxtaglomerular apparatus. Okay, let's see if I can get this to move forward. Okay. 2-point question. What is the end product of protein metabolism? What is the end product of protein metabolism that is excreted in the urine? So when you metabolize proteins, what is the part that's excreted in the urine? Is it glucose, ketones, bile, or urea? And so knowing which one of these derives from proteins can help. In fact, it will give you the answer if you know which one of these derives from proteins. So the best answer here is D, urea. Urea is actually the one that has an amino group, meaning an NH2 group. And so it can actually come from proteins. Glucose is a sugar, ketones derive from sugars, and a bile is a mixture of sugars and lipids. So the only one that can really come from protein is urea. And so that is the best answer here. Okay. Next question. What substance stimulates renal hydroxylation in the process of producing vitamin D? So vitamin D has to be produced, well, can be produced in the body. We can also get it in supplements, but what substance stimulates renal hydroxylation so that you can produce vitamin D? Is it thyroid hormone, calcitonin, parathyroid hormone, or erythropoietin? And the best answer here is going to be parathyroid hormone. In general, parathyroid hormone is one of the main hormones that's going to influence renal function overall. And one of the things that it does is help in producing vitamin D because it stimulates renal hydroxylation. So hydroxylation is the addition of hydroxyl groups onto, in this case, vitamin D to produce a form of vitamin D that you can actually use, the 125 hydroxyl vitamin D. Okay. Next question. A 2-point question. A student asked the professor to explain the role of pyrophosphate, potassium citrate, and magnesium in the formation of kidney stones. Which of the following responses by the professor is the best response? And so the 3 things here: pyrophosphate. And so pyrophosphate is 2 phosphate groups connected. Potassium citrate, that's a salt where the positive ion is potassium, the negative ion is citrate, and magnesium is a metal. And so it's an element and molecule that you can see in the blood. It also is an important cofactor in a lot of things, right? And so it's used for things like stabilizing DNA. So the professor can give one of these 4 responses. So what the professor says is that these 3 things stimulate the supersaturation of salt, or they inhibit crystal growth, or they facilitate the precipitation of salts, or they enhance the crystallization of salt crystals. Some of these are pretty similar. The best answer here, so the thing that is the most accurate statement that the professor could give is that these 3 things, pyrophosphate, potassium citrate, and magnesium, inhibit crystal growth. So in approaching this particular question, these other 3 things go the opposite direction. So just by the process of elimination, you should be able to get to B. So supersaturation of a salt, that is akin to crystallization. When you supersaturate a salt in solution, that's at the point where with any crystallizing event, so any nucleating event, you're going to form the crystals. So the solution is supersaturated. In the one in C, if these 3 things facilitated the precipitation, you would also be forming crystals. And D directly says that they enhance the crystallization of salt. This is the only thing in B that goes the opposite direction. And so that is the one by process of elimination that you would pick, because the other 3 are all associated with crystallization And these three things actually inhibit crystal growth of salts. So they are preventing the formation of those crystals and the formation of kidney stones. Okay, next question. Moving along. Okay, so this is more about the urologic system. So you have a female patient who has been diagnosed with an uncomplicated, urinary tract infection, UTI. What self-care measure does the healthcare professional teach the patient that is specific to this type of infection? And so this would be a 3-point question. Should the healthcare provider tell the patient to drink at least 8 glasses of water a day? Should it tell the patient to take medication if they have a fever? Should they tell the patient to rest as much as you can in the next few days? Or should they tell them after using the bathroom, after voiding, you should wipe from front to back? And so which one of these would be the best thing that the healthcare provider could tell the patient that has been diagnosed with an uncomplicated urinary tract infection? And so all of these are actually very good things to tell the patient, but which one is going to give you the best response and the most chance of that patient not having a recurrence of that UTI? And so this is an uncomplicated UTI. The most common microorganism that's going to cause this is going to be E. coli. E. coli is an enteric bacteria, and so it actually comes from the feces. So the best way to prevent E. coli infection would be to prevent, the infection or the cross-contamination from feces. And so that's why the best answer here is to tell the patient to wipe from front to back. That prevents the cross-contamination from the feces. All of these other things are great for infections, right? If you have a fever, take medication to help lower your fever. Drink 8 glasses of water a day. It's important to stay hydrated to help clear the infection, in this case, a bacterial infection. Resting can also help you fight off an infection. But the one that's going to prevent a recurrent infection would be a practice that disallows that cross-contamination. And so that's why D is the best answer here. Okay. So far everything's been, come on, go to the next one. Okay. Oh, I think that one repeated. So I would just be aware that there's 2 of the same question there. Okay. So we've only got a couple more here. So far, that all the information has been from the urologic system, the renal and the urologic system. The next few questions come from the digestive system. And so they're examples of the digestive system information and examples of questions that could come from there. Okay, so the first one in the digestive system. A patient is a 2-point question. A patient reports feeling constipated. When assessing this patient, what is the longest period between bowel movements that the patient should report to be considered within the normal range? So what is the normal range of bowel movements? So if should the patient report bowel movement once a day to be in the normal range, once every 2 days to be in the normal range, once a week, or once every 2 weeks? And so the question on this, I'm going to do a bit of explanation on. And explain why this answer is the answer. So the best answer is actually C. See if I can get to it. The best answer is C, once a week. And so normal bowel movements can occur from a few a day to once a week, right? when you get into once every 2 weeks, now that's going a bit long between bowel movements, and suggests that there's something that you should look at, some pathology that you should look for. All three of these kind of fit into, so A, B, and C all fit into what would be considered normal as far as the number of bowel movements in a particular time frame. So once a day would be considered normal, once every 2 days. So most commonly it's going to be once or twice a week, right? That's going to be the most common normal bowel movement that people have. Once a week is still considered normal, right? But it is actually, so look at the question again, it is the longest period between bowel movements that would be considered normal. So that is the best answer. These two are shorter than that. And so the longest one in the answer choices is once every 2 weeks, but that's actually too long to be considered normal. That would be considered abnormal. Once a week still fits in within the normal range, and so that's the best answer here. Okay. Okay, and so this is a 1-point question, just kind of knowing the definition of functional dysphagia, or well, in this case, the cause of functional dysphagia. So what is the cause of functional dysphagia? It's a 1-point question. Is functional dysphagia caused by intrinsic mechanical obstruction? Is it caused by extrinsic mechanical obstruction? Is it caused by tumor? Or is it caused by neural or muscular disorders? And so which one of these would cause functional dysphagia? Dysphagia is dysfunction in eating, right? And so functional dysphagia, the best answer here is going to actually be an intrinsic mechanical obstruction. So I can get it to show up. Oh, wait. Oh, I'm on the wrong question. Okay. So the cause of functional dysphagia, the best answer is going to be neuromuscular disorders. So functional dysphagia is problems with eating, right? And so neuromuscular disorders can interfere with voluntary swallowing or peristalsis, and that can cause functional dysphagia. Mechanical obstruction, either intrinsic or extrinsic, would be an external means of it could still cause dysphagia, but it would be an external means of causing that, and actually tumor would be an intrinsic mechanical obstruction. And so the one that kind of fits doesn't fit the pattern of these three is neural or muscular disorders. And what the neuromuscular disorders do is that they do interfere with the normal process of eating, right? And so they can interfere with swallowing or peristalsis. These other three are actually obstructions. And so it's not interfering with the process, it's preventing the movement of food through the GI system. And so neural or muscular disorders is the best answer here. And I think we have one more on the digestive tract. That would be indicative of a 3-point question. So this is asking you to use your knowledge to answer a new situation. So here a patient has been admitted for possible small intestine obstruction. What is the first sign that the healthcare professional assesses for what would indicate the presence of this condition? So what's the first thing that you as a healthcare worker would assess for the presence of a small intestine obstruction? So that's what the patient's been admitted for. So are you going to look for distension? Are you going to look for electrolyte imbalances? Are you going to look for dehydration? Or are you going to look for vomiting? And so what is the best answer? What is the thing that you would consider to be the first sign of a small intestine obstruction? And in many cases, the first sign is going to be distension. And so what you're going to see is distended belly. And that's going to happen when you have a small intestine obstruction, because you get this backup, right? You get the backup of the gases, and that's going to cause the distension. And that's going to happen before you see any electrolyte imbalances in the blood. It's going to happen before the patient starts vomiting. Within about, it takes about 24 hours yeah, for the electrolytes for the electrolytes to show up, changes in electrolytes to show up, and then copious vomiting or sequestration of fluids in the intestinal lumen is going to prevent their reabsorption, and that produces a severe fluid. That's what's going to produce the fluid and electrolyte disturbances. And so you will get to this point where you can get to vomiting, dehydration, and the electrolyte imbalances. But what's going to show up first is the distension. It's going to take about 24 hours for any of these other things to show up. And so the first thing you look for is distension. And so I think that was the last question. Yep. And so let me stop sharing. There we go. Okay. And so we're back. I'm going to look through the text, the chat, to see if there's any other things that I missed. Yes, Amanda, I'm perfectly fine to stay a little bit after the Zoom ends to answer your questions. If you don't think that they're going to benefit the other people on the call. So right now, what I'd like to do is open it up for anybody who has questions. I've gone through kind of the ideas about what's going to be on the exam. The study guide is accurate. We went through some sample questions, talked about some ways that you might study, talked about the extra credit, and how that's going to show up. I am going to put a poll up in Canvas that you all can answer about whether you would like the opportunity for 5 to 10 points extra credit associated with that paper submission, which of course you can still do. You don't have to have already done it. You can still do that. If it gets there by the time I turn in grades, I will count it. I will actually, before I put up that poll, I'm going to look at the parameters for that paper submission and let you know exactly how many points I'm thinking about. And I will also post an announcement about calculating your own grade with the curves that are on exam 1 and 3, so that you know where you're at. Also in that poll, I'm going to have a question about whether it would be advantageous for people to leave the exam open through Friday, as well as being open, leaving it open another 24 hours essentially, because that will kind of match the timing that we had for the other exams. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking for a second and see if you guys have any questions. If you don't, it will take a while for this to render. It usually takes about 10 minutes for them to render, but I'll get this recording posted so that everybody in the class can take advantage of it. And you can feel free to speak up or write in the chat if you have any specific questions. If you guys don't, so I lied, I'm going to continue talking. If you don't have any specific questions now, but something comes up, you can always contact me via email. I know I'm behind with emails right now. I'm trying to catch up within the next 24 hours, trying to catch up on those emails. I don't think I've gone beyond my 48 hours yet, but it's slower than I usually am. So I'm trying to catch up on emails, but you can always contact me with email questions, or request a Zoom meeting with me, right? Um, uh, or an in-person meeting if you happen to be in Denton. Okay, if nobody has any specific questions, let me give you one last assessment of the questions on the final exam. For the comprehensive material, I am really trying to focus on main ideas. So how each of the system works and what major dysfunctions look like in each of the systems. For the new material, that's going to be similar to the first three exams, so that similar level of detail. So it is going to have more detailed questions on the material since the third exam. Okay, if there are no questions that you guys want in the recording, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.